Ladies and gentlemen, the Alabama Senate will now come to order. Our prayer today will be delivered by Senator Dan Roberts. Senator Roberts.
Mr. President, thank you. Gentlemen, may we pray. Lord, we come before you as we gather yet again today and ask that you would lead, guide, and direct our steps. And we commit this time to you in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Senator Roberts. Today, the pledge will be led by Senate Page Kenneth Rogers. Kenneth is paging for Senator Chambliss.
Attention, salute, pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which is one nation with indivisible.
Thank you, Kenneth. Secretary, call the roll.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Allen. Mr. Barfoot. Mr. Beasley. Mr. Bell. Mr. Butler. Mr. Carnley. Mr. Chambliss. Here. Mr. Chasteen. Here. Ms. Coleman. Ms. Coleman Madison. Mr. Elliott. Ms. Figures. Mr. Gavan. Mr. Gudger. Mr. Hatcher. Mr. Hovey. Mr. Jones. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Livingston. Mr. Melson. Mr. Orr. Mr. Price. Mr. Reed. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Schofield. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Shelnut. Mr. Singleton. Mr. Smitherman. Here. Mr. Stewart. Here. Mr. Stutz. Mr. Wagner. Ms. Weaver. Mr. Williams.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have 31 senators present, which is a quorum. The Senate is ready to transact business.
Mr. President.
Senator Wagner.
Move that we excuse absent senators.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. President.
Senator Wagner.
Move that we dispense with the reading of the journal from the previous legislative day and that we move to adopt the previous journal.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. All right. Real quick before we get started, I want to recognize some special guests in the gallery. When I call your name, if you could please stand. The Junior League, sponsored by Pike County Chamber of Commerce. If y'all could please stand. Welcome to the Alabama Senate. All right, the guest of Senator Carnley. So great to have you all. All right, now move on to introduction of bills.
Yes, sir. May I be recognized?
You can't. Yes, you're recognized.
Mr. President, I move a motion that the bills can be introduced at a, I guess you're saying any time during
Throughout the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any objection?
Okay.
Hearing none, so ordered. All right. All right, no House messages. Committee report. All right, now move on to committee report. Secretary, call the first committee.
From the Committee on Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Safety, Senate Bill number 12 receives a favorable report with one amendment by a vote of 5 ayes and 0 nays.
Mr. President,
Senator Smitherman.
I request the title be read.
All right, Secretary, read the title.
Senate Bill number 12, relating to state holidays to designate Alabama Peace Officers Memorial Day.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. That's why I got that down. What the stuff here?
From the Committee on Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Safety, Senate Bill number 17 receives a favorable report by a vote of 5 ayes and 0 nays.
Mr. President,
Senator Smithman.
I request the title be read.
All right, Secretary, read the title.
Senate Bill number 17, relating to the United States Armed Forces, to include the United States Space Force in all collective references to the United States Armed Forces. From the Committee on Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Safety, Senate Bill number 19 receives a favorable report by a vote of 5 ayes and 0 nays. From the Committee on Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Safety, Senate Bill number 37 receives a favorable report by a vote of 5 ayes and 0 nays.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Yes.
I request the title be read.
All right, Secretary, read the title.
Senate Bill number 37, relating to the Military Family Jobs Opportunity Act to amend Section 31-1-6, Code of Alabama 1975, as amended by Act 2022-92, 2022 regular session, to extend professional license reciprocity to spouses of United States Department of Defense civil servants, and to make non-substantive conforming changes to the law.
All right, these bills received a second reading to be placed on the calendar for next legislative day, and this concludes committee reports. All right, now move on to motions and resolutions. Any motions or resolutions? All right. Next, go to local bills. Secretary, call the first local bill.
On page 15 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 63 by Senator Wagner, relating to the city of Vestavia Hills. BIR pending.
Mr. President, move adoption of the BIR using the short roll.
All right, we need to get a long roll. All right, Secretary, call the long roll.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Allen. Mr. Barfoot. Mr. Beasley. Mr. Bell. Mr. Butler. Mr. Carnley. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chastain. Ms. Coleman. Ms. Coleman Madison. Mr. Elliott. Ms. Figures. Mr. Gavan. Mr. Gudger. Mr. Hatcher. Mr. Hovey. Mr. Jones. Aye. Mr. Kelly. Aye. Mr. Livingston. Mr. Melson. Mr. Orr. Mr. Price. Mr. Reed. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Schofield. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Shellnut. Mr. Singleton. Aye. Mr. Smitherman. Aye. Mr. Stewart. Aye. Mr. Stutz. Aye. Mr. Wagner.
Aye.
Ms. Weaver. Mr. Williams.
Thirty-one ayes, 0 nays. The BR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 15 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 63 by Senator Wagner relating to the city of Vestavia Hills.
Senator Wagner.
Present. Members, this is a bill proposed by the Vestavia Hills Board of Education. It calls for a millage increase on the people of the city of Vestavia. As y'all know, we have one of the better school systems, in my opinion, in the state, and they've asked for a millage increase, which I'm honored to sponsor. So with that brief explanation, Mr. President, I move adoption or passage of Senate Bill 63,
All right, do you want to use previous role?
Mr. President.
previous roll.
Okay.
President.
All right. Got an objection for that? Would you like to be recognized? You're recognized.
Yes, first, let me say that I'm one of the co-sponsors of the bill, and I just want to bring to the attention that it's a tax bill, but I readily sign as a co-sponsor, and I'm going to vote for the bill. And the reason I'm going to vote for the bill because, you know, I've always been that way about our municipalities or our cities. If that's something that city relates to that city, then it's the person that represents them is the person that's accountable with that city. In this case, it's you know, with them. I said that just to say that we did the same thing with Centerpoint. I don't know who represents. You represent Centerpoint? I don't. I think it's Senator Coleman. Don't you represent Centerpoint? Centerpoint. Okay. And with Centerpoint, we did that with streetlights. You remember? I mean, those cameras, if you remember. But what concerns me is that in many cases, the city of Birmingham does not get the same consideration, even in our delegation. And i.e., last year, I had a bill for traffic lights, you know, the same thing we put in Centerpoint, same identical, for the city of Birmingham, because we got this exhibition driving that we've had people to get killed. You know, and you know that we've had at least about 3 or 4 people to get killed downtown where people doing exhibition driving. But yet, the chairman of our local delegation in the House would not address that bill, even though we as a Senate delegation readily passed that particular bill. I'm saying the same thing in the same spirit with our water. So I'm saying that just like I'm doing here, I have the same expectation that situation should be addressed by the city itself or the people thereof. So I want to just take this moment to express my concerns and my thoughts about that. And with that in mind, at this moment, I'm going to yield back to you so that you can move forward. Wait, I think he wants you to recognize him.
Mr. President,
Senator Singleton.
good morning. So Wagner, I want to thank you for bringing this bill, you know, because I think education is important, and whenever you can see what's a need to tax yourself, you should. I just want to say that in the same vein, and I know that there are going to be organizations, you're going to probably, you know, I see how Vestavia and other school systems who can do this with no problem. I stood at this mic last year and talked about organizations like in the rural areas when we want to put a school tax on, they're going to be out there with the big old no signs saying no. I'm just going to see whether this same organization is going to be in your community saying no. Because that lets me know then that they're discriminating in rural areas versus urban areas or rich folk versus poor folk, okay? It's gonna give me a parameter of what they're gonna do. Because they're saying, based on their policy, they don't want no land taxes in terms of education. They don't want that. So I applaud you for bringing this, and I want you to pass it, and I hope y'all get it passed to do what's best for your children in your district. Thank you very much.
All right, Senator Wagner.
Mr. President, I will renew my motion to give the passage of Senate Bill 63.
All right, Secretary, call the long roll.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Allen. Mr. Barfoot. Mr. Beasley. Mr. Bell. Mr. Butler. Mr. Carnley. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chastain. Ms. Coleman. Ms. Coleman Madison. Mr. Elliott. Ms. Figures. Mr. Gavan. Mr. Gudger. Mr. Hatcher. Mr. Hovey. Mr. Jones. Aye. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Livingston. Mr. Melson. Mr. Orr. Mr. Price. Mr. Reed. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Schofield. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Shelnut. Mr. Singleton. Mr. Smitherman. Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stutz. Mr. Wagner. Ms. Weaver. Mr. Williams.
All right, 16 ayes, 0 nays, 2 abstentions. Senate Bill 63 passes. Thanks, Senator Wagner. I'd like to recognize some special guests in the gallery. When I call your name, if you could please stand. Leadership St. Clair County, the guest of Senator Bell. If y'all could please stand. Welcome to Alabama Senate. Great to have y'all today. All right, Senator, you're recognized.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I have a resolution that I ask for unanimous consent on for it to be sent to rules that's commemorating Jana McGinnis on her 1,000th game win as Jacksonville State University
All right.
softball coach.
Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Secretary, read and receive the resolution.
Thank you.
And after you read it, send it to rules, please.
Senate Joint Resolution by Senator Kelly commending Coach Jana McGinnis for winning 1,000 games as the head softball coach at Jacksonville State University is referred to the Committee on Rules.
Senator Singleton.
Mr. President, I'd like to seek unanimous consent to introduce the SJR out of order, please.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Secretary, read and receive the SJR.
It's okay if it gets sent to rules.
All right, and then after you read it, send it to rules, please.
Senate Joint Resolution number 16 by Senator Singleton creating the Joint Interim Study Commission on Responsible Technology Purchases by Public Education is referred to the Committee on Rules.
Mr. President.
All right, thanks, Senator Singleton. Yes.
Mr. President, I have an SR here.
All right, Secretary, read and receive the SR.
We're good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Singleton.
Mr. President,
Senator Roberts.
I have a resolution honoring Representative David Faulkner's mother, SJR.
All right, requires unanimous consent. Would you like to make that motion? All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Secretary, read and receive the SJR.
Senate Joint Resolution by Senator Roberts and others mourning the death of Mrs. Patricia Camp Faulkner.
President, I'd like to move final passage.
Okay. All right, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Resolution's adopted.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Senator Roberts.
Mr. President,
Yes, Senator, you're recognized.
I have an SJR.
All right, Secretary, requires unanimous
Ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Secretary, read and receive the SJR.
Did you get it?
Senate Resolution number 18 by Senator Shelnut recognizing the first Friday in February as National Heart Health Awareness Day.
Mr. President, move for final passage. No objection.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Resolution's adopted.
Mr.
Thanks, Senator
President,
Shelnut. Senator Wagner.
Mr. President, I have a resolution from Rules. It's a resolution sponsored by Senator Orr, and I'd like to offer the resolution at this time.
All right, Secretary, read and receive the report from Rules.
From the Committee on Rules, Senate Joint Resolution number 8, honoring the 75th anniversary of the State of Israel and reaffirming the bonds of friendship and cooperation between Alabama and Israel.
Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Orr.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move for unanimous consideration and also, or consent, and then also to add all senators as co-sponsors. Oh, come on, do a joint motion.
So all senators are on there. It came out of Rules, so we don't need unanimous consent.
Great.
We just need
All
final
right.
passage.
All right, I'd move final passage of
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Resolution's adopted. Thanks, Senator Orr. All right, Senator Wagner. Senator Wagner.
Mr. President,
Senator
I
Wagner.
have a report from the Committee on Rules.
All right, Secretary, read and receive the report from the Committee on Rules.
From the Committee on Rules, Senate Resolution number 19, Special Order Calendar. Be it resolved by the Senate that the following bills and the order name shall be the special paramount continuing order of business, taking precedence over all other matters until disposed of for the fourth legislative day only. On page 12, Senate Bill number 113, relating to healthcare facilities. On page 9, Senate Bill 1, relating to correctional incentive time. On page 9, Senate Bill number 104, relating to civil liability. On page 12, Senate Bill number 32, relating to motor vehicle registration. On page 2, Senate Bill 44, relating to court costs. On page 5, Senate Bill 52, relating to the Alabama Safe at Schools Act. On page 6, Senate Bill 27, relating to agriculture authorities. On page 1, Senate Bill 14, relating to marital and domestic relations. On page 6, Senate Bill 56, relating to public K-12 schools.
All right, Senator Wagner.
Mr. President, I'd like to make the motion that we endorse the report from the Committee on Rules. But prior to that, I think one of the senators would like to comment.
All right, yeah, that'll be good. Before I recognize you real quick, I'd like to recognize a very special guest in the gallery. She's here on spring break, watching her dad work down here, Ridley Skaggs. If you could please stand on the front row. That's the daughter of Jess and Charlotta Skaggs. Welcome to Alabama Senate. Great to have you here, Ridley. All right, Senator Bell.
Mr. President, water is something that's very important to us. And in St. Clair County, we take water very serious. And when I was elected by my constituents in St. Clair County, we have a city named Moody, Alabama. And we are under the Birmingham Water Works. We are under the Birmingham Water Works. We don't have a representative to control our water, what flows into the city of Moody. Bills are looked at, bills are talked about, we meet, we get together on bills, and if we're all involved, things work out better. There's been a bill dropped in the House that affects my district and affects Moody, Alabama, and I'm not happy with it. I just want everybody to know when I come down here, I was elected to represent my constituents. I was elected to represent my district, and I'm going to fight for them, and I'm going to do what I have to do when I have to do it. I want a seat at the table. I want to be involved, and if you're going to do something to affect my district, I expect to be consulted early on, whether you're in the legislature, whether you're in the business community, whether you're something. I expect for someone to discuss it with me or the town that it involves or anything. This is a precious resource we have, and we can't do without it. And I want involvement in any bill that's introduced that involves Birmingham Water or it involves anything to do with my district, and I'm here to stand up for my district. And I know I've got 20 minutes I can talk, and I know you don't want to hear me for 20 minutes, but I think each and every one of you would stand up for your own district and do what you need to do. There's not a one of us here that would not do this. And I'm upset. I mean, I know I'm a freshman. I don't have the 20 years down here that my predecessor had, and he did a good job fighting for our district. And I'm going to do the same. I'm going to fight for my district, and I'm going to be a part of anything that deals with my district. And I am easy to work with and love working with people. We got a great body here. We have a great body down here. Just pick up the phone and call me. Pick up the phone and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about something. We'd love your involvement. I really think with involvement, we can get a lot done. And I love being videoed. So, I mean, we got cameras up here. I love being videoed down here. Call me. I will help you. I will come up with ideas. I will listen to your ideas, but make me a part of this. Don't try to shove something down my throat for my district that's going to affect my district for a long time. I'm going to be here at the mic, and I'm going to talk. That's all I ask. My name is Lance Bell, and I am proud to be the senator from District 11, which includes Moody, and gets their water from Birmingham Water Works. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bell. We have a motion to adopt the special order calendar. Does anyone else want to talk?
Mr. President,
Senator Smitherman.
I want to talk.
Mr. President, point of order.
You recommend?
Do we have a motion? Are we speaking to the motion, or are we speaking to points of personal privilege?
No, we're speaking to the adoption of the special order calendar right now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem and Mr. President. Yeah, I want to talk to a little bit to the special order calendar. I think we have some good bills on the calendar, Let me say that first. I want everybody to know that. I think we have some good bills on the calendar. As we come up, I would like each person to be prepared to kind of explain to me about the bill, because I really want to know and understand the bill. I mean, I don't have to ask that of the person for me to take up some time to filibuster, but I really want to know about the bills. And I really want to know what impact that they have. Some of them I do know what they have. I understand the visitation bill in the hospitals. I understand it's another one bill in here that deals with the let's see, what's the third one? I mean, the one dealing with the dram shop. I'm familiar with that. We went through that sufficiently enough. I know somewhat of the bill dealing with the good time, although we had committee meeting Wednesday. And yes, if you notice our committee schedule yesterday, I was with the honorable senator that's sitting right there now by the majority leader. I was with him yesterday evening in confirmations, and then from confirmations we moved out here. And so I just haven't had time that I would like to have had to get with the sponsor of the bill that deals with the good time. Although I do commend her for taking a second step to being open to receive recommendations. So that bill, I may want to talk a little longer with that person just to get a true feel for what that bill really does, other than the time as it relates to the changing of the good time as it relates to sentencing. Some of the other ones I'm not as familiar with. Because I'm not on those committees, and this is no negative whatever, but this is my first impression, other than I kind of knew those other three would be on there just by instinct, but I had no knowledge about the rest of them being there, which, because of that, I've got to have more of an extensive conversation to get up to speed to where I think I need to be so I can be able to vote respectively and considerably for those particular bills and knowing what they may do. So I kind of want to say it that way, that the two of them on here, I know enough about them myself that we can just come up and move. But when we get to the one with the good time, I think I need to get a clearer understanding of it, some of the impact that it's going to have. We just didn't have enough time in committee. And I think, I'm looking for Mr. Chairman of Judiciary, and I think that he'll tell you that we had about 3 issues in there that took up most of the time, and we really couldn't, we put adequate enough time for him to be able to call a vote, and he gave everybody adequate time to talk. That's not the reflection on him. It's just that we only had so much time because people had to go to other committee meetings as well. So I just want to get a little more conversation about that particular bill to feel comfortable enough to at least fully understand the impact that it may have. So I kind of want to just say that so each and every person will do that. Now, the second thing is this. How much more time I got? 10 minutes, okay. The second thing is this, is that, and I want to give, I'm not saying this is the only person, but I want to give the Education Budget Chair some kudos, because what he has made an effort to do is and I'm gonna say what he's made a good effort to do, has gone directly to address what I'm getting ready to address here. And he's done it more than once. I'm gonna give him his flowers while he's living. and that is he is so. These are live flowers; they're not dead. But I will give them to you, and that's this. He has had such a positive array of bills that he, readily addressed and sought out members in our caucus to be a part of, to sponsor even. And that has even enhanced the ability for the rules chair to be able to set an agenda that will reflect a third of the bills coming from the caucus. So that's where I'm giving you a flower to commend you, even where we may have necessarily haven't gotten through the channels to get to this point. I want to give him his kudos for it. I mean, you deserve that for real.
Well, thank you. Hey, may I make a quick announcement, Senator?
Sure.
Okay. So the senator across the way this morning asked me about the budgets and things like that. I want the members and you folks in the gallery that have an interest in this. So we got the governor's budgets, of course, and they've all been filed. For you members, I need to see you, and I need to see you soon to talk about your priorities or what interests you have. If you've got particular interests that came from across the street, here's the point, and it's also the point for you folks in the gallery and people who can hear my voice. I'm going to say it kind of loudly. Just because it came from across the street does not mean that I have a clue about what that is. So if you've got particular priorities that you've worked elsewhere to get ensconced in the budgets that are currently before us, do not assume that your humble F&TE chair knows about it. That being said, I need to know about it. That's my job. So I would challenge you, if you're a member or if you're an interested party, you better come see me, because if I don't know what it is, then things will change. And that's not a promise. If I do know it is what it is, it's not going to change. What I'm saying is, we know the outcome if I don't know what it is. So, Senator, thank you for the time, and
Yes, sir.
Wax on. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Orr. Real quick, Senator Smitherman, I need to recognize some special guests in the gallery. The guest of Senator Weaver. When I call your name, if you could please stand. Deputy Chris Poole, Sheriff John Sharon, Captain Ken Harmon, Alabama Sheriff Association Executive Director Jimmy Lambert. If y'all could please stand. Welcome to Alabama Senate. Thanks, Senator Smitherman.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're back to you.
Yes, sir. How much time we got? 6 minutes. Okay. So as I was saying when I was complimenting our budget chair about that, is that you're chairman of the committees. Work diligently to help move the bills through the committee from. Best way I can say it, from outside of the aisle, if that's what you want to call it, so that we can be able to be in a position to be considered by the Rules Committee and the Rules Chair for participation in the special order calendar, so we can have some adequate representation on the calendar as it relates to the minority caucus and the bills that we are going to be considering on the floor. As I look at this one, and you can see what I mean when you look at it, we have 1, 2, 3, let's see, 3, little pages want to stick together, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we only have one bill on there. Out of 9, we got 1. So you see what I'm saying? You know, I just wanted to make sure I brought that to your attention, so that you will be aware that it's going to take a collective effort for all of us, you know, to be able to make sure that there's adequate bills to be considered by the Rules Chair as it relates to the special order calendar. So, Mr. President,
Sorry about that.
so I guess wherever we are in the process of trying to adopt it, the special order, if it's to be moved again, I'll move.
Yeah, so we had a motion from Senator Wagner using the long roll.
Yes, yes.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Anybody else want to speak? All right, Secretary, call the long roll.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Allen. Mr. Barfoot. Mr. Beasley. Mr. Bell. Mr. Butler. Mr. Carnley. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chastain. Ms. Coleman. Ms. Coleman Madison. Mr. Elliott. Ms. Figures. Mr. Gavan. Mr. Gudger. Mr. Hatcher. Mr. Hovey. Mr. Jones. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Livingston. Mr. Melson. Mr. Orr. Mr. Price. Mr. Reed. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Schofield. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Shelnut. Mr. Singleton. Mr. Smitherman.
Aye.
Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stutz. Mr. Wagner. Ms. Weaver. Mr. Williams.
Thirty-one ayes, 1 nay. The special order calendar is adopted. Secretary, call the first bill.
On page 12 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 113 by Senator Gudger and others relating to healthcare facilities. BIR pending.
Mr. President,
Senator Reed.
I know that my colleague Senator Gudger is going to be coming to take his place here to talk about this, and I appreciate my colleague giving me a moment to speak on something that I think is very important to all of us. And I want to remind the body, I want to remind the legislature, but I want to remind the people of Alabama about what I'm about to discuss. In 2012, coming out of the Great Recession, the people of Alabama were in a serious financial situation. We had looked at cuts of nearly $1 billion out of our education programs. We had difficult times. There was a decision made coming out of the Great Recession in 2012 to borrow $437 million from the People's Trust. Rightfully so, it was there as a savings account for when times were tough. When we borrowed that money, we passed a law in 2013 with this body to say we were going to pay that money back to the people of Alabama. There was many that said we couldn't do that we wouldn't do that. We would just let the savings account go unfilled. But I am excited to recognize today that Alabama has paid, based on the legislative actions, over $1 billion back to herself since those difficult times. And I want it to be noted that this body and our colleagues downstairs put the final nail in the coffin of the payment of those resources when we did what the governor signed this morning to pay that last $60 million back to the People's Trust. It is there in perpetuity for the opportunity to secure the benefit of what Alabama wants moving forward. A conservative approach to our budgets and doing what we say we're going to do to the people that sent us here. So my reason for rising today is to congratulate and thank the members of the Alabama Senate, the legislature, the governor, all those involved in the decision to fulfill our commitments in paying the resources back to the people that sent it. And now that fund is now full. There may be difficult days in the future, but at the moment, we can rest in the knowledge that we made the right choices for the right reasons, for the right commitments at a time such as this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Reed. All right, Senator Gudger.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the opportunity to be up here to talk to you about this particular bill. I know we're going to have some dialogue back and forth, I believe, Senator Smitherman, but before that, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to move the BIR. We have a roll already, correct?
Yeah, using previous roll?
Using previous roll.
Any objection? Object? All right, Secretary, call the long roll.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Allen. Mr. Barfoot. Mr. Beasley. Mr. Bell. Mr. Butler. Mr. Carnley. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chastain. Ms. Coleman. Ms. Coleman Madison. Mr. Elliott. Ms. Figures. Mr. Gavan. Mr. Gudger. Mr. Hatcher. Mr. Hovey. Mr. Jones. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Livingston. Mr. Melson. Mr. Orr. Mr. Price. Mr. Reed. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Schofield. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Shelnut. Mr. Singleton. Mr. Smitherman. Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stutz. Mr. Wagner. Ms. Weaver. Mr. Williams. Williams is
not. 30 ayes, 0 nays. The BR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 12 of the calendar, Senate Bill 113 by Senator Gudger and others relating to health care.
All right, Senator Gudger, before we get started, I'd like to recognize some special guests to the gallery. They're guests of Senator Gudger, the wife of Harold Sachs, Bonnie Sachs, and daughters Debbie and Dallas. They're from Winston County. If y'all could please stand. Welcome to the Alabama Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yep, Senator Gudger.
This has been a bill a long time coming. We have everybody in this room, like I said last week when we started debating this bill, everyone has a story of someone that they love or someone that they know, friend, family, or their spouse that has been affected by visitation issues at healthcare facilities. Working on this bill for the last 2 years and making sure that we've got it correct this time with the associations and the stakeholders, colleagues on this floor, and the family that really started this whole process with me and Senator Pro Tem Greg Reed. We have finally got to this point where we're able to put this bill as a third reading on the floor of the Alabama State Senate. I do know that we have a presentation for a amendment coming up in a second, and that's fine. But as we go forward, this means a lot to me, this particular bill, and I think to all Alabamians throughout the state and how this affects each and every one of us. So I'll stop and have some dialogue and recognize Mr. Senator Gavan.
All right, Senator Gavan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Gudger, thank you for bringing this bill. Thank you for your diligence on it. This is special to me in a couple of ways. One is I knew Harold Sox for several years, many years while I was on the Republican Executive Committee, and he was involved. And then when I was senior vice chair of the party, he was the executive director. And I just remember those when he would commute back and forth to Winston County every day. He was so dedicated, so diligent. And when I'd call him, even though he had me by about 20 years or so, he'd say, "Hey, Mr. Sam, how you doing?" And always very helpful, very pleasant, and just a joy to be around. You know, the Lord puts us in places that sometimes we're not anticipating, sometimes it's just fortuitous, and we never know when we're going to be able to be there for somebody. And it's very unusual. As most of you, after we adjourn on Thursdays, I head back north and go back to Huntsville. And on one particular Friday, March 4th of last year, I was asked to stay over and meet with the governor the next morning. And so as I'm going through, about midday or later in the afternoon, I guess, but by the time I got there, going through Birmingham, I thought, well, I'm just going to check with Senator Roberts and see what's going on. And he said, "She's about to go. You need to get over here." And well, there's only one answer to that is, I'll be right there. And to be there and see that at least their family could see her. And it was a beautiful testament to the love of that family. And Princeton Hospital had a ground floor where the family could walk up. And the grandchildren had written things on there in reverse, so they're messages of love to their grandmother. And I came up as Ann was passing. And to be there to embrace Ann at that time was just a special privilege for me, and I love him, and I know so many of you love him, and he has been so heartbroken by this and was so heartbroken by only being able to look through that window. But how many people couldn't look through that window? How many people, they were on a second, third floor of a hospital, a nursing home, and you can't see. And I know those caregivers were doing, or many of them were doing the best they could with FaceTime or Zoom or some sort of communication, trying to help those family members. But there is nothing like having a dedicated caregiver, somebody who's not just worried about the sustenance that somebody's going to get to keep them, fed and nourished, but making sure their medicine's right. I mean, look, people in hospitals make mistakes, and it's another set of eyes that is totally focused on that person that's receiving the health care. And I just think that's something that we need to do. And so I guess I'm speaking, both jumping from speaking on the bill to speaking on the amendment. My amendment, which I'll offer.
All right, Secretary Reed received the amendment.
Amendment to Senate Bill 113 by Senator Gavan. Replace line 90 on page 4 with the following: Harold Sachs and Ann Roberts Act.
All right. I just would like to have this tribute to our friend and his late wife, in addition to Harold Sox, but Ann Roberts. Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I guess at this point in time, I would move passage using previous role if there's no objection.
All right, we're on the amendment. Have a motion using previous role. Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton, Mr. Williams.
Thirty-one ayes, 0 nays. The Senator Gavan amendment's adopted. Thank you, Senator Gavan.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, Senator Gudger, back to you.
First of all, I would like to say on the amendment anyway, I appreciate that. I definitely ran that past Bonnie, and she means the world to me and my family, but I told her about Dan's and our colleagues' situation for the last year, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody was on board, and you know that everybody on this floor loves you and still prays for you every time we think about Miss Ann and how special she was. But the only other person that's got as much integrity as Harold Sox was obviously Miss Ann, and she treated you good, and you've turned out to be okay, Dan. But at the same point, we love you, buddy. Thank you.
All right, yield.
Yield.
All right, Senator Coleman.
Thank you so much. I did not think that this would be the first time that I was speaking before the Senate body, that I would be giving my own personal story. Not like Senator Roberts, but similar. My former colleagues in the House know that in 2019, December of 2019, and I said I was going to tell this and not cry. Whew. December 2019, I took my husband to the hospital, and he never made it out. He actually passed away on February 14th, 2020, right before the shutdown. And for those 3 months, I was in the hospital every single day. And I could not imagine not having the opportunity to be there with him when he took his final breath. And so I do support this piece of legislation wholeheartedly. Also knowing that having that family there as an advocate also gives them a little extra push that they need at times to continue to fight. But I did have one concern that you and I did discuss. My husband had idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, they think. Remember, this was right before we all knew what COVID was. And then they said he had connective tissue disease, they thought. But he had a lung disease. He had an issue of the lungs at the time. And my concern, in which I think we've cleared up, and I just want to make sure in the bill we have, is that if I had gone into that hospital carrying something and he be exposed to something that I have, in this particular situation, COVID, how are we going to ensure that the visitors coming in don't further expose the people that we just really want to be there to help and support?
I'd like to go ahead and answer that if is that good? So having this bill and going through it, we thought of the same issues that could happen. If there's noticeably somebody that comes into the hospital as a visitor and needs to be checked for whether that's COVID or flu or anything, and you don't want that particular visitor to go into a patient's room and infect other people and that patient, especially if you're looking like at a cancer patient with low white blood cells or something like that, then through the hospital's procedures and policies that they have put in this bill, they are able to test anybody that comes in. If the doctor deems that this particular patient doesn't need to have visitors, for example, church groups, the general population come and visit, the doctors can still have the authority to not allow visitors in that room, except for one essential caregiver at least once a day for 2 hours minimum, and if there is visiting hours. But that caregiver is someone that does what we just talked about, that you're next to their bedside to help them, whether that's just give them ice chips, is what I did with my father when he was in there, taking them to the restroom, walking them around, giving them support, giving them emotional support, giving them love because they know when you're there. And so this bill allows for the doctors and the hospitals, healthcare facilities to be able not to have visitors if they so deem. And then number two, they're still in charge of that. The only thing that they're not through this bill, which we've added, is that one essential health care giver can be at the bedside.
I just want to, and thank you for that further clarification. I only have that original version of the bill, where in the policies and procedures portion, it just talked about that they may establish it. But I'm going to trust in this particular situation that, everything that you just said, because this is a body that we deal in integrity. And I'm just going to have to, at this point, because I had originally introduced it or had handed you an amendment that specifically said that they had to be able to prove that they were negative. But what you just helped me with was, because my amendment was specifically on COVID.
Right.
It had nothing to do with flu or any of these other diseases that somebody who was immune deficient could be impacted by. So I'm going to trust today that the hospitals, who are the practitioners and the professionals, will do all that they need to do to make sure that folks are not bringing in something that will further expose that patient. And just thank you all for, giving me the opportunity to kind of share a piece of me and my story. Again, I could not imagine over those 3 months, I was in the hospital every single day, not being able to be with him and help make those decisions for him coming down to the end of life. So thank you for this piece of legislation.
I want to make sure you realize from what the information you gave me and sharing your story with me, I made sure that I put that in there and made a point of that. But everything you've said today is covered in there, and you're still able, if he was here, you would still be able to go to his bedside.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Coleman.
No
Thank you for
further
sharing
comments.
your story.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you for
Coleman.
sharing your story.
All right, Senator Gudger.
Mr. President.
Senator Roberts.
First of all, it's a little emotional, but I cannot believe you added Ann's name to this. I had no knowledge. I tried to get the bill before committee yesterday, and it was unavailable. And I normally read every bill in every committee, and I was unable to get that. And I was overwhelmed yesterday. So, colleagues, I cannot tell you thank you enough, and honored in that the Sox family would be willing to share this moment. I'm totally humbled. I don't think we could have gotten any better care than we got. And yes, being on the first floor, we stood outside a window for 48, 49 days and weren't allowed to go in. I would have bought a spacesuit to go in. Some of you know that one of my main love language is physical touch. I like to hug people. When I lived in Brazil, everybody hugged all the time, and I know we don't do that in America, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, but physical touch is one of my love languages. And it is to not be able to touch my wife's hand, to not be able to do any of that, but we could still see her through a window. The Sox family did not have that privilege, and so many did not. So we're grateful for what we had, but we are humbled, honored, and overwhelmingly humbled by this gesture. And I just say thank you very much, colleagues, and love you guys. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Roberts.
So
right,
I'll explain a
Senator
little bit
Gudger.
about the bill if you'd like for me to, Senator. Or would you prefer me to go ahead and talk a little bit about the bill? Or what would?
No, can I be?
All right, Senator Gudger, you got the mic. You yield?
Yeah, I'll yield.
All right, Senator Smitherman, you're recognized.
Thank you. No, you were right when you were talking about different people have different stories and different things they could share with you. Because I had a relative, and I never. Well, not just on the relative, I had some clients during the same period. And I never dreamed that when I went to Brookwood Hospital, that I'm just telling you, the first time that they kicked this in, what you talking about, I never dreamed that I would have to sit outside on a park bench for 4, 5, or 6 hours. Just to because of the protocols. I never thought about that. I'm sitting out there, in the elements. It wasn't raining, but it wasn't comfortable. But I know what you're saying, and I mentioned to someone else that I had a person who was doing some volunteer work on a Sunday. I mean, no, it was like maybe a Saturday, Friday, Saturday, and they had to go into the hospital. And only to discover that when they went in, relatives could not see. That was the last time their relatives had a chance to see them. And then, so I understand, and I just want to tell you, I commend you for what you have done on this bill. And with that, I yield back to you unless somebody else.
All right.
Senator. I yield back to you.
All right, thanks, Senator Smitherman. All right, Senator Gudger.
I want to make sure that through this bill, there's been a lot, through our pandemic and just going in healthcare facilities with my father before he passed away. And like we just said, everyone has a story in this room, and every Alabamian has a story that they went through during these times. This bill is not a negative reflection on our healthcare facilities, on our hospitals, our healthcare workers. They are the heroes to everybody I know that's in this room, and they helped my whole family. They've helped every family in here, and those are the people that were on the front lines doing everything they had to do to help us an Alabama to get through that pandemic and taking care of our loved ones. And so this particular bill, again, is just for an essential caregiver to be able to go into a room to be with their loved ones, either at the end of life, through a childbirth, or any other issues that are having with the patients that are there. But this is not a reflection, and I wanted to make sure that you and I talked about that while we're here. This is not a negative reflection on our healthcare facilities or their workers. This is a positive and only enhances and says thank you to all the healthcare workers that are out there that's helping people today.
Just dialogue.
Yeah, y'all are recognized for dialogue.
No, I commend our healthcare facilities for coming down on the side of caution. And that's what they did. They wanted to make sure on that end, even though it might have in some cases gone a little further than they would have needed to go. So no, they'll be commended for coming down on that side of the ledger. What I think that you're doing is that I have on my sleeves is what you're doing. And you know, and I kind of wear things for a reason sometimes. And on my sleeves, I have my cufflinks. And on my cufflinks, I have the scales of justice. You know, and they're balanced on both of them because I knew I was coming today, and I, you know, and I wanted to think that justice would be balanced, and I'm not here saying it's not as we relate at all, but I'm saying that that's what I think that you have done. You have kind of brought it back to where it needed to be all along, and I just want to commend you for that. And with that, I yield back to you.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Senator Smitherman. All right, Senator Gudger.
I do have one last amendment that was brought to us by the hospital and healthcare facilities. Is all it does is changing the word because we define the word facilities. It changed from we use providers. We're just using it back to facilities. They have signed off on it, and all associations have. But I'd like to present this at that time.
All right, Secretary Reed, receive the amendment.
Amendment to Senate Bill 113 by Senator Gudger. Replace line 115 on page 5 with the following: be more stringent than those established for the facilities. Replace line 129 on page 5 with the following: caregiver will be on a given day the healthcare facility shall allow. Replace line 134 on page 5 with the following: patient of a facility and facilities may not require Replace line 164 on page 6 with the following: family before being admitted to the healthcare facility's care is. Replace line 184 on page 7 with the following: violates the facility's policies and procedures. Replace line 192 on page 7 with the following: procedures required under this section healthcare facilities must make.
All right, Senator Gudger.
I'd like for passage of that particular amendment using previous rule without objection.
Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Stahlbritton. Mr. Williams.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The Senator Gudger amendment's adopted. Senator Gudger.
Thank you. Wrapping this up, it all started with this gentleman right here, Harold Sachs. There's a story about him, one of our constituents, and this is where this particular bill began. And I was at his funeral, and Bonnie came up to me and says, I need something from you. I wasn't able to see my husband the last few months of his life, and that's not fair to people. And by doing that, it started a process through the pro tem's office and myself of getting this together. Over time, we've amended this particular process, and through the help of Lieutenant Governor's office, bringing this all together, we're able now, with getting ready to hopefully have unanimous vote to pass this in the Alabama State Senate. We have allowed today, with the passage of this, for every Alabamian to be able to walk in and be with their loved ones at any procedure that's going to be going on as an essential caregiver. And we have allowed Alabamians to have justice and freedom to do what they need to do and to be with their loved ones. It says in the Bible, the number one fruit of the Spirit's love. You know when someone's with you. You know when someone's there, even if you're unconscious. You know that something's there to keep you safe, and that's what this bill's been about, and I thank you for telling your story while you're here, Senator. So on that, I would like to have final passage using previous roll without objection.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton, Mr. Williams.
Shelnut, Senator Shelnut.
33 ayes, 0 nays. Senate Bill 113 passes amended. Thank you, Senator Gudger.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate it. And thank you to the body. Thank you.
All right. Secretary, call the next bill.
On page 9 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 1 by Senator Weaver relating to correctional incentive time, BIR pending.
Senator Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the recognition. Today I bring before you SB 1, and I think the first thing I need to do is make a motion to adopt the BIR using previous roll.
All right, we have a motion to adopt the BR using previous roll. Any objection? All right, objection. Then did you want to speak on this motion?
I do.
All right, you're recognized.
Senator, do you want to take this time? You don't have to, but if you'd like to take this time and kind of talk to me a little bit about, you know, the bill itself, and I'll tell you why I said this. You may have not been in here, you may have, but I'll repeat myself. First, I want to thank you for
So I should?
I want to thank you for being willingly considerate to look at some amendments. I want to thank you that first. Unfortunately, in my case, you know, if you go through the litany of time, we didn't have a whole lot of time in committee because we had 3 issues that was considered and discussed at length. You did tell me yesterday right there that if I had some additional changes. Unfortunately, as I left you, I had to go I'm looking for him to be with that senator right there in a committee meeting. And then I had to be with that senator right there sitting down in a committee meeting. From there, I had to be out here. As you can see, we came in about three-ish. And then after that, of course, you know, I think everybody was headed down Dexter, you know, on the right. So I haven't, and this morning, you know, these are nice things to have to do that I'm saying, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve on committees and do that. But this morning we had to elect, where is he? The senator over there sitting back from Huntsville as the president of our legislative council. Congratulations. So if you can see that, and of course I went back last night, so if you can see that, I really hadn't had an opportunity. That's why I wanted to say that really it's not being diligent, you know how that is, dilatory, whatever. No, I just want you to, that's why I owed it to you to show you why when I make that statement that I hadn't, okay? Now, having said that, I would like for you to kind of share a little bit. You know, I mean, I know why, you know, what happened, and I'm with you, you know, So you don't have to go there with me. I'm with you why you're doing what you're trying to do. It's just the what we are actually doing in the implementation of it. If you could discuss that, and then I may or may not have some comments or considerations for you, okay?
First of all, thank you for your cooperation. You and I are good buddies.
Yes.
From the same place, so you know that I'm as good as my word, and when I tell you I'm going to work with you and do my best, I will always do that. So.
And before you say that, I want to just say this, because I saw the people up there. You know, so when she says that, I'm going to make preference to some people in here. I grew up in Shelby County. I grew up probably about 15 miles from where they live. And so I grew up, went to high school, went to college, you know, so I as you talk about these places and you talk about these kind of situations, I can relate to it. And I think, you know, through our conversation, we had a chance to see that. So I just wanted to share that with everybody and with you too, that I represent an urban area. But I always tell people I'm a country boy that went city.
We know where you're from.
Yeah. So go right on.
Appreciate your comments, and again,
Okay.
appreciate our relationship that we have here. And like I said, you and I have always worked well together. I'm going to continue to work well together. I know that you know my story, and most of the people here in the body know my story, but June 29th of 2022, Deputy Brad Johnson and Deputy Chris Poole, Deputy Johnson and Chris Poole were chasing a felon who stole a car not too far from where we're from, and it wound up going right down the road right by my house. And that day, Deputy Johnson and Deputy Poole were both shot in the head right there by my house. And thankfully, Deputy Poole survived and is able to be here with us today. But the man that killed Deputy Johnson was released on good time. And I believe he should have been behind bars on that day that he shot Deputy Johnson. He had escaped from DOC custody. He was still earning good time. And I just believe that is unacceptable. And like you and I talked, none of us want bad people who don't want to do good in our communities. We don't. And you know, I believe that this tragic situation revealed a flaw in our system that was literally lethal that day, and I believe we have an opportunity to correct that. So that's why I'm here today with this good time bill, and that's my reason for bringing it today.
All right. Well, I guess I'll start out by saying this. What impact would the change in good time have to a person? And you got the levels in there, and I don't remember. I said I didn't put all that to memory, but a person who was a trustee. Okay, and you know that's probably the highest level. They go in and out at will. You know what I mean? Basically. They're the kind that they'll let go, you know, a few of them, they'll let them get in the vehicle, go around the corner to the store and pick up stuff and come on back. They probably got a monitor on their ankle, you know, they really can keep that kind of eyes on them. But those kind of people there, what kind of impact would this have on them in terms of the areas of good time that's been reduced?
So, like I brought up in committee, if people are, good time was originally called correctional incentive time.
Yeah.
And the purpose for good time was to give incentive for people who were trying to do better and who are trying to do good. So in your situation like that, I would say if that person is trying to do good and they're trying to better themselves, they're still going to be eligible for good time, because we are not changing the thought process behind good time. We are changing some of the calculations, and we do want to change some of those things that we talked about that are actions that if you do these things, you are not eligible for good time. And I think we all agree, if you escape, if you try to kill somebody, if you sexually assault somebody, all those things, somebody who does those things to people, we don't want them back out in our communities on good time if they're still doing those things while they're in prison. And
let me ask you this though: if a person is doing let's just say in the class, like in the first level I was just talking about, and you made the statement that they will continue to, if they do the right things, you know, the different things you said, they will continue to be eligible for good time, incentive, you know, what you said it is. My question, though, is that is the person that's in that category who falls into the area that you said, and I agree, that if they do all the things that they're supposed to do, will this bill, however, reduce the amount of time that they can accumulate from where it is now for good time? And I'm talking about that good model person now, the one we just talked about. Are we also cutting the amount of good time they would be eligible to also?
So the answer to this is yes. And the reason that I believe this is important is when I started looking at the way that we give good time here in Alabama, and it's one of the things that we talked about in committee. Alabama has the weakest good time laws in the country. We rank number 50, and I actually had a board that was a graph that I meant to bring here. It's in my office. If my clerk is listening, how about bringing me that board that I meant to bring? It's sitting by my chair in the office. But I got some information from NCSL, and the graph shows all 50 states graphed it out on where they are with good time from 0 to 75 days. And Alabama is number 50. So, I mean, we're dead last, and our laws are 2.5 more times lenient than California. They're 5.5 more.
Senator Weaver, the time has expired on the BR, and the motion was using previous roll, or was there an objection to that? Objection. Okay, Secretary, call the long roll.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Allen. Mr. Barfoot. Mr. Beasley. Mr. Bell. Mr. Butler. Mr. Carnley. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chastain. Ms. Coleman. Ms. Coleman Madison. Mr. Elliott. Ms. Figures. Mr. Gavan. Mr. Gudger. Mr. Hatcher. Mr. Hovey. Mr. Jones. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Livingston. Mr. Melson. Mr. Orr. Mr. Price. Mr. Reed. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Schofield. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Shillnut. Mr. Singleton. Mr. Smitherman.
Aye.
Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stutz. Mr. Wagner. Ms. Weaver. Mr. Williams.
All right, 28 ayes, 4 nays. The BR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 9 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 1 by Senator Weaver relating to correctional incentive time. Committee amendment pending.
So I also have a committee amendment that I need to adopt, and I would like to move the motion for that using previous roll.
All right, would you like to speak on the committee amendment?
Just for a minute.
All right, you're recognized.
This is just for the record, this will be germane to the bill, and it'll touch on the amendment, but it's a question. A statement and a question, then I'm gonna yield. I perfectly understand, and I'm in full support of people who do those things that you were saying. They escaping, they out there hurting people, are supposed to be incarcerated, or supposed to be out, and they've done some things there that's of course not in self-defense. I want to say that. I'm gonna tell a little story in a minute that relates to that. But I understand, and I'm in accord, okay. But my concern is kind of what I just asked you about, is that why are we taking a person that's a trustee and that's a model person that's been doing everything by the book that they asked them to do, and then not having those people in a separate category to be incentivized because of being a, lack of a better word, a model inmate. I would wish that category of person would not be thrown in a big old pot, in the same pot that the person who did what you were just talking about. That's just a different than night and day. But what we're saying is that just because you're there, you get the same zapping in percentage-wise as the rest of them get, who the people you're talking about now. I would hope that before the bill is brought to a final vote, that some kind of way a consideration can be given for that aspect of it. And this is what I hadn't had a chance to get with you on. You know what I just want you to know that. And that's why I went through this explaining why I couldn't before I start saying this as if it's the last hour, and I'm kind of, I want you to know why, so I didn't want you to think it was intentionally to hold back and say at this moment I'm gonna do it. It wasn't that part at all. But I just, that's the general concern that I have, that I hope some kind of way, as you all work through the different people that may have amendments and things of that nature, that some kind of way that we can, there may be a way to address that. I will say this to you. I'm gonna tell you a little quick story, and then I'm gonna yield the mic. I had an opportunity while I was in law school to be the clerk of district criminal court, and I preside in judges court for 2.5 years. And as such, he required all of us to be trained as deputies. And the reason being, so if the bailiff wasn't there, or bailiffs, sometimes we had two, if they were not there, then I would be certified to go to the jail and bring back these inmates myself. And of course, in our situation, we have a tunnel. So you go down through a tunnel and go all the way over there and rise up. The thing that the reason I'm telling you that is this, and the reason I'm saying that it's important about somebody trying to defend themselves, is that when a young guy about 18 or 19 or 20 is getting ready to go in and be held there for a while, as they'll either make bond or either they're relating for the trial, we would pass by the day room, that's what they call it. And then while we were trying to go through the processing, they will start fighting in the day room. See, this is some folks ain't gonna want to hear what I'm gonna say, but they need to hear it. They was fighting in the day room, and they would ask me, they would say, why did they start fighting after we got here? When we first walked up, they wasn't fighting. And I had to tell him, I said, they're fighting to see who's gonna try to get to you. You hear what I just said? They are fighting to establish who's gonna be the one that's gonna try to get to you. I ain't gonna have to say nothing else. You know what I'm making reference to. So at that point, that person got to defend themselves. because they're going to be trying to be overpowered by probably some older guy been in there for 10, you know what I mean? So when you said that's why I said that self-defense is just the nature of it. You know, I mean, it is prison, it is jail, it is what it is. But, yeah, okay. But in there it's a jungle, you know. And I mean, that may be because of what they did, they should be there or not. That's to be debated. But they still got to survive. And they're going to either get taken out by that 250 plus people that got killed in the last year in our system, you know, that if they don't defend themselves, they'll be 251. Okay, so I had to say that that's something that needs to be addressed. That a lot of times in that case, under the fact pattern, if they are defending themselves, then that should not be one of those elements, you know, that takes them out the game. That's all that I kind of want to say. And I think I shared it in the meeting.
Would you like to respond to that?
I just want to say that I think I shared it in the meeting about the lady that works next door. The law is a law firm next door to mine, and she's the paralegal, and her son is incarcerated. And he's been jumped on twice, and they almost killed him this last time. And so he's still in the infirmary. They moved him from the hospital back to the infirmary. And in that case, but for them having knowledge of what was going to take place, he could have easily been reclassified to a higher classification where he would have to go back into that same facility with them same people that just almost tried to kill him. And so I had to share that's why I said that it's important to dissect out of this the ones that we need to keep locked up and not terrorize the community versus taking a big net and just pulling everything that's in the building in there and putting them all in the same net without taking some consideration for the ones who have done or are doing what you're saying. And most of those is nonviolent, you know, would naturally be nonviolent situations. But or someone who is in there for a illness, and that illness being their own drugs. You know, I'm glad that we've started, in conclusion, I'm glad that we've started opening our eyes and opening our minds and opening up our consideration when people do things or things happen, that they don't just throw them in a box. It used to be easy to throw people in a box, behavior like that, well, they bad. We finally gotten past that to talk about people who got mental illness and treating them for that versus treating them as a criminal. The same thing with people who are hooked on drugs. They have a medical problem as well. You know, I know you hear some folks say, well, how they get there in the first place and all like that. Well, listen, I try to subscribe as much as I can to what the Bible says when told Lot. If you all remember Lot and his wife, he said that when you leave in this city, don't look back. You know, look forward and try to go forward and move in a positive way. So I just wanted to share that with you, that's something that I hope as you all further go through this process that you can address and we can see if there's something feasible to be done, okay?
I knew that the self-defense piece, after we had a discussion, was very important to you. And while you were here on the floor talking yesterday, I actually had conversations with Senator Singleton about that. And I believe that you have an amendment that's going to address that
Okay.
I'm willing to take. And I hear you, and I agree with you on that self-defense piece.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll yield the mic back to you and Senator Singleton. I guess you coming up. But I'm going to yield it back to you. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, Senator Weaver. Thanks, Senator Smitherman.
So I've made a motion to adopt the committee amendment using previous role, and I would like to do that.
All right, did you want to speak? All right. Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton, Mr. Williams.
28 ayes, 4 nays. The committee amendment is adopted. All right, Senator Weaver.
So again, I believe I have already explained the bill, and if there are no questions, I'd like to move, before I do that,
Yes.
I need to let Senator Singleton talk about an amendment that he and I had talked about.
All right, so you have the mic. You yield?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right, Senator Singleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, let me just say that I understand where you're coming from with this bill, and I understand the emotional concept with it and all, but as I explained to you, I still think that there are some other consequences that goes along with this bill that could be unintended. And I understand that, and I try to separate what I think is emotional away from what I could see as visually coming down there as a reality that could affect our system in terms of the long run. And as you know, we are currently under federal court order, and you and I discussed the fact that now, instead of people getting out from good time in or could be credited to get out a little early to help get rid of some of those bed spaces, we're actually keeping them in a little bit longer, and I don't know what effects of that's going to have with the federal government when they see this kind of legislation coming. Now, and we don't know what that may be. And I'm just trying to think ahead of that. And the other thing is that under the good time law, I just think that it should not be blanket. I think that those people that are doing well and doing good should be. I think the guy who escaped, good time shouldn't be given to him while he escaped and doing that. So I agree with you on that. But at the end of the day, I don't want to blanket take it away from everybody. And so I have a couple of things, housekeeping things I want to do with you today, if you would so indulge in me, okay? Number one, I told you, I gave you a substitute, and we talked about it, and the substitute that I offered based on the days and the classes of time that people would get was kind of reduced. You're going from a 30 to 30, okay, 30 for 30. They can still receive it, but it'd be just 30 for 30. And I think my substitute went from 30 to 75 to 30 to 60. So it was just a reduction. In my substitute, where yours would keep a person in about 800 more days in prison, my substitute would only keep them in like 251 more days in prison, okay? And so I was asking that we kind of split the baby, as folks would say, and you've been adamant about what you feel about that. And I ask you that if I bring my substitute up, that we just get an up or down vote. But you were able to look at my substitute, and you found some good pieces in there that you would like, and we pulled them out to offer them as an amendment, and I will bring that along secondly, okay? So I just want to give myself an opportunity on my sub, and it can be an up or down vote, and then we'll come to those amendments that you and I have come to an agreement that I think that makes this bill just a little bit better, if that's where we are, okay? Because I just think that we're setting ourselves up for something down the line that we'll be right back here trying to deal with if the federal government, number one, says that, hey, I see y'all pass legislation to keep folks in. Why? Okay, and we need to be trying to release people. If our parole board was releasing folk, I wouldn't have no real problem with this bill, because if the parole is out, then the good time is not up. But the good time gets up because we're not paroling anybody out. And so this is something that I think the DOC sees as a problem, and it's a tool for DOC to use to be able to have some level of control. Do we have the best culture inside of our prison system? No, we don't. Does it need working? Oh, yes, it does. And so, but I just don't want to be on the extreme end. And my voting against this bill, and as I've told you, it's not because of the concept or against Deputy Brad Johnson, his family, or anybody, or anything of that. It's just that I just don't like putting everybody in the same fishbowl together, because I believe in second chances. I really and truly believe in second chances. I believe in the fact that if Bobby Singleton goes and he does everything that's properly right, he does all those things that are asked of him to do inside that facility, regardless of what crime I committed out here, I believe people can change. I really do. So this is a concept of almost saying that nobody can change. But I believe people can change. I believe people have a different heart. Sometimes after things happen to them, they get locked down in a different situation, they can change. And I want to give them every opportunity to be the best citizen that they possibly can when they come back out. Because each and every one of these people that we have in here are going to ESO out someday. Except those that may be life without in, or those that are on death row. But at the end of the day, those that are not are going to ESO out, and they're going to hit our streets again. They might be 99 on a stick, but they're going to hit the streets again. And so it's not like we're going to be able to put a monitor on them. It's not like we're going to be able to talk about good time. And these same things could happen even after they EOS, okay? And so that's where we are, and I think that we have to look at the bigger picture of the system and how it's working, and as whether or not we're putting ourselves into a position to where we're setting ourselves up to something that is going to be catastrophic, because there could be riots behind this. There could be, guards get killed. Not just only officers in the street that have gotten killed. We've had guards to get killed inside of our system. Guards that we send in there every day that work for the state of Alabama has gotten killed inside these systems based on dealing with people, okay? And so that, and we never come to this mic and we never do anything about it. It's just another guard died or another inmate died. 250 inmates has either been assaulted or died. Something happened to them probably since last year. I think it's like 250 since last year, or this year alone. And so I'm going to offer a substitute, and the substitute I'm going to explain it a little bit, and just ask for an up or down vote, okay? And the substitute, basically, as I said, changes from the 75 days to 60 days, all right? It goes from 40 days to 30 days, and from the 20 days to 15 days, and on class 4, there will be no correctional incentive, as you have it in your bill. It also, the sub also includes the 3 amendments that I'm going to bring that dealing with the self-defense piece. It deals with rioting, and you were so eloquently to bring back to us that we want to make sure that no one lose their First Amendment right to be able to peacefully protest if they so do so. And it's include that, and it also includes the cumulative number of days based on the data that you were asking, okay? And that you like that piece, right? And so I'm going to offer this substitute that with that. And I think the only thing that you and I would disagree with are the numbers, the days.
Right. And so, yes, you and I did talk about this. I am not in favor of the sub, and I would encourage the members to vote no.
All right.
After that, we'll address your amendment.
All right, Secretary Reed received the substitute.
Substitute for Substitute for Senate Bill number 1 by Senator Singleton.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just like up or down vote and like to call a long roll.
All right, Secretary. Call the long roll.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Allen. Mr. Barfoot. Mr. Beasley. Mr. Bell.
No.
It's okay to vote aye.
Mr. Butler.
Nothing wrong with that. You'll be all right. You're gonna live.
Mr. Butler. Mr. Carnley. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chasteen. Ms. Coleman. Ms. Coleman Madison. Mr. Elliott. Ms. Figures. Mr. Gavan. Mr. Gudger. Mr. Hatcher. Mr. Hovey. Mr. Jones. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Livingston. Mr. Melson. Mr. Orr. Mr. Price. Mr. Reed. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Schofield. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Shelnut. Mr. Singleton.
Yes. Aye.
Mr. Smitherman. Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stutz. Mr. Wagner. Ms. Weaver.
No.
Mr. Williams.
Four ayes, 25 nays. The Senator Singleton substitute fails. Before we get started,
Thank you, Mr. President.
hold on one second. Let me recognize some special guests in the gallery. Gulf Shores Elementary students, if y'all could please stand. The guest of Senator Elliott. Welcome to Alabama Senate. All right, great to have y'all today. All right,
Mr.
Senator
President,
Singleton.
I'd like to offer an amendment.
All right, Secretary Reed and receive the amendment.
Amendment to Senate Bill 1 by Senator Singleton. Replace line 165 on page 6 with the following. C, assault that causes serious physical injury, excluding when used in self-defense as determined by the Department of Corrections. Replace line 169 on page 7 with the following. G, rioting, excluding civil protests. Replace line 217 on page 8 with the following. F3, including the cumulative number of days that were forfeited.
Mr. President.
Senator Singleton.
Yes, and these are the amendments that really just pulled from the substitute that we just voted down. And as I said, the only thing that's different in what you're doing and what we want in the substitute, we're making sure that people who are in who may be in those situations of self-defense is being identified, is not being taken away their good time because they were in a self-defense state. We're also making sure that those people who may be just peacefully protesting is not being considered that they are rioting. And also, we're making sure that you get the data that you need, that you are asking the Department of Correction for. And so with that, I'd like to offer the amendments, and I think that these are some agreed upon amendments that we agreed upon. And if you would like to speak to it, that's fine with me.
I absolutely would. And Senator Singleton and I worked over his sub that he just offered. Yesterday, we came to the agreement that these are some areas that we could agree on. So I would encourage my colleagues to support his amendment to this bill.
I would like to ask for move to adopt. Long roll, yes.
Call the long roll.
Yes, long roll.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Allen. Mr. Barfoot. Mr. Beasley, Mr. Bell, Mr. Butler, Mr. Carnley, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Chasteen, Ms. Coleman, Ms. Coleman Madison, Mr. Elliott, Ms. Figures, Mr. Gavan, Mr. Gudger, Mr. Hatcher, Mr. Hovey, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Livingston, Mr. Melson, Mr. Orr, Mr. Price, Mr. Reed, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Schofield, Mr. Sessions, Mr. Shellnut, Mr. Singleton.
Aye.
Mr. Smitherman, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Stutz, Mr. Wagner, Ms. Weaver,
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Twenty-five ayes and 1 nay. The Singleton Amendment is adopted. Senator Weaver.
If there are no other questions, I'd like to make a motion for final passage.
Use the long roll.
Motion made for final passage using long roll. Clerk, call the long roll.
Mr. Albritton, Mr. Allen, Mr. Barfoot, Mr. Beasley, Mr. Bell, Mr. Butler, Mr. Carnley, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Chasteen, Ms. Coleman, Ms. Coleman Madison, Mr. Elliott, Ms. Figures, Mr. Gavan, Mr. Gudger, Mr. Hatcher, Mr. Hovey, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Livingston, Mr. Melson, Mr. Orr, Mr. Price, Mr. Reed, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Schofield, Mr. Sessions, Mr. Shellnut, Mr. Singleton, Mr. Smitherman, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Stutz, Mr. Wagner, Ms. Weaver, Mr. Williams,
Thirty ayes and 1 nay. SB 1 receives final passage.
Thank you. May I have a point of personal privilege?
You're recognized, Senator
Thank
Weaver.
you, sir. So on behalf of Deputy Brad Johnson and his friends and family, I thank my colleagues for this today. Deputy Poole, we're glad that you can be here with us. We appreciate you and wish you well in your recovery, and hopefully by this step that we've taken today, we've made safer communities for all of the state of Alabama, and that you and your colleagues will never have to go through things like this again. And thank you for all that you've done to help get this bill passed.
Thank you, Senator Weaver. Clerk, call the next bill.
On page 9 of the calendar, Senate Bill 104 by Senator Elliott and others relating to civil liability. BIR pending.
Mr. President.
Mr. Pro Tem.
Mr. President, I just do not want us to not recognize the kind of work that we do in this body. What just happened here was an issue that transpired on the hearts and minds of men and women across this chamber. You had unity in the work that was done by both the minority and the majority. This is the way we do good things for the people of the state of Alabama. It needs to be noted that that's the way we work in this body. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Senator Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. President. SB 104 deals with liability insurance reform. I'd like to go ahead and move the BIR, please. We can use the long roll.
Clerk, call the long roll.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Allen. Mr. Barfoot. Mr. Beasley. Mr. Bell. Mr. Butler. Mr. Carnley. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chasteen. Ms. Coleman. Ms. Coleman Madison. Mr. Elliott. Ms. Figures. Mr. Gavan. Mr. Gudger. Mr. Hatcher. Mr. Hovey. Mr. Jones. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Livingston. Mr. Milson. Mr. Orr. Mr. Price. Mr. Reed. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Schofield. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Shelnut. Mr. Singleton. Mr. Smitherman. Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stutz. Mr. Wagner. Ms. Weaver. Mr. Williams.
(29 ayes and no nays). The BIR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 9 of the calendar, Senate Bill 104 by Senator Elliott relating to civil liability.
Senator Elliott.
Mr. President, thank you. This bill deals with liability insurance. What we're trying to do is fix a problem we have in our state, where our ISO rating is one of the worst in the state of Alabama. This changes the liability issue from a strict liability to proximate cause liability. It's been supported by a broad group of folks, from insurance folks to restaurants and hospitality folks and retailers, and I think it's got broad support. I think my colleague has got a question or comment, and I'd like to yield to him, Mr. President. I'd like to yield to my colleague, Mr. President.
Senator Carnley.
Thank you, sir. I just want to commend Senator Elliott for an excellent job in bringing multiple groups together. This started for him a long time ago, but as somebody that's in the insurance industry and see how this impacts businesses, for me, customers, but also friends, that are dealing with the, I think unintended consequences of where we are today with this legislation. So I appreciate everybody that was involved in this, and thank you for bringing groups together, and look forward to getting this bill passed and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Smitherman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just rise to echo what my colleague just said to you. Let me say this. When somebody get a chance to watch you go through this process and talk to everybody, that you know how much work you put into it and consideration you gave to everybody. I mean, every concern you really, really did. And I just want to commend you for it. And with that, I yield back to you.
Thank you, my friend. Got to have a little lemon flavoring in there, don't you? Mr. President, move final passage using previous roll without objection.
Any objection to using previous roll? Seeing none, clerk call the previous roll.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
29 ayes, 0 nays. SB 104 receives final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Clerk call the next bill.
On page 12 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 32 by Senator Wagner relating to motor vehicle registration. BR pending.
Mr. President,
Senator Wagner.
move adoption of the BR using short roll.
All right, any objection? You did a fine job. Using the short roll, correct? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
29 ayes. Do they know?
29 ayes, 0 nays. The BR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 12 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 32 by Senator Wagner relating to motor vehicles and traffic.
Mr. President,
Senator Wagner.
this bill creates a distinctive license plate for brain cancer research at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. It's called the Blazer Bolt Foundation. It's a nonprofit that raises funds to support research for UAB neuroncology. So with that, I understand there's an amendment.
Mr. President.
Senator Schofield.
I have an amendment.
All right, Secretary, read and receive the amendment, please.
Amendment to Senate Bill number 32 by Senator Schofield, replacing lines 20 through 21 on page 1 with the following. Be it enacted by the legislature of Alabama. Section 1, this bill shall be known and may be cited as the Lares-Herring Act. Replace line 51 on page 2 with the following. Section 3, this act shall become effective on January.
Mr. President.
Senator Schofield.
This is an amendment to name this act after Jill Butler Larry's and Heath Herring. Jill was Senator Butler's daughter, who unfortunately passed away from brain cancer. And Heath Herring is the husband of Kelly Herring, who serves as Secretary Harris's assistant. And Heath actually came up with the idea to do this distinctive car tag while battling brain cancer. So, thank you, Mr. President.
All right, so we have the amendment. Do you want to move?
I'd move to adopt the amendment using previous roll.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
29 ayes, 0 nays. The Senator Schofield amendment's adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Schofield. Senator Wagner.
Mr. President, move passage of Senate Bill 32 as amended using the short roll.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
30 ayes, 0 nays. Senate Bill 32 passes as amended. Thank you, Senator Wagner. Secretary, call the next bill.
On page 2 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 44 by Senators Singleton and Smitherman relating to court costs. BR pending.
Mr. President,
Senator Singleton.
I would like to, well, let me just tell you, under the current system of our court, in a committal situation, a lawyer may work preliminary joint work for a client who may be committed, and until the judge makes it official, they cannot be paid for that work that they're doing prior to it. So what this bill does is, and what we're getting is that a lot of lawyers are going back and trying to pad that, make up because they did the work prior to it. And so what we're doing now is saying that the probate judge, if the probate judge so appoint that attorney in that case for that client who's going to be committed, then any preliminary work that they did prior to that, the probate judge may then sign off on it and they can get paid for that. With that explanation, I'd like to move for the BR use of previous role without objection.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
Thirty ayes, 0 nays. The BR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 2 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 44 by Senator Singleton relating to courts and judges.
Mr. President, as I just explained, the bill does no more than that. I'd like to move for third reading to dispense with use of previous role without objection.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
30 ayes, 0 nays. Senate Bill 44 by Senator Singleton passes. Thanks, Senator Singleton. Secretary, call the next bill.
On page 5 of the calendar, Senate Bill 52 by Senator Orr relating to the Alabama Safe at Schools Act. BR pending.
Mr. President.
Senator Orr.
Move adoption of the BR using the previous role.
Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
30 ayes, 0 nays. The BR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 5 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 52 by Senator Orr relating to the Alabama Safe at Schools Act.
Mr. President.
Senator Orr.
This allows for somebody who's not a parent or a nurse, after they are trained, to give cortisol shots for adrenal insufficiency. I have an amendment regarding the effective date of the act.
All right, Secretary Reed received the amendment.
Amendment to Senate Bill 52 by Senator Orr. Replace lines 140 through 141 on page 6 with the following. Section 3, this act shall become effective immediately following its passage and approval by.
All right, Senator Orr.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd move adoption of the amendment using the previous role.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
30 ayes, 0 nays. The Senator Orr amendment is adopted. Senator Orr.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move third reading that links be dispensed with using the previous role.
Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
You want to vote? Yeah. 31 ayes.
31 ayes, 0 nays. Senate Bill 52 passes. Thank you, Senator Orr. Secretary, call the next bill.
Vote.
Oh.
On page 6 of the calendar, Senate Bill 27 by Senator Melson relating to agriculture authorities. BR pending.
Mr. President,
Senator Melson.
this is just kind of a cleanup clarification bill, and I'd like to go ahead and move the BR using previous row.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The BR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 6 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 27 by Senator Melson relating to agriculture authorities. Committee amendment pending.
Committee substitution. I'd like to adopt the substitution using previous row without objection.
All right, any objection? Here, you object?
A substitution.
Adopting the committee substitute. Okay, so, all right, so ordered then.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The committee substitute's adopted. All right, Senator Melson.
Mr. President, what this does, Bill, if you have previous members that might be elected officials or other things and they go to emeritus status, it allows them to get tickets and things like that and be ambassadors without having to worry about an ethics situation. And then it also clarifies that in previous authorities established are not under city ordinance. So like if you wanted to have a open container event or something like that, they could do that without going under city ordinance. So I'd like to, any questions from a colleague, or I'd like to ask for final passage using the previous row.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Previous row?
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
Thirty ayes, 1 nays. Senate Bill 27 passes amended. We do. Thanks, Senator Melson.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, Secretary, call the next bill.
On page 1 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 14 relating to marital and domestic relations by Senator Chambliss. BR pending.
Mr. President, I move the BIR using the previous roll.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
30 ayes, 1 nays. The BR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 1 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 14 by Senator Chambliss relating to marital and domestic relations.
Mr. President, this is a bill that current law allows for exemptions for fees for those filing a protection for abuse order. However, if that order is violated and they go back for a contempt order, those fees are not exempted, and they should be, because obviously they're dealing with difficult situations. So with that, I'd entertain any dialogue from my colleague.
No dialogue. I just want a question. So we are now going to exempt the fees if they had to go back for the contempt?
Yes, sir.
Good job. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
Go right on. Good job.
With that, Mr. President, I move final passage using the previous roll.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
31 ayes, 0 nays. Senate Bill 14 by Senator Chambliss passes. Thank you, Senator Chambliss. Secretary, call the next bill.
On page 6 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 56 by Senator Orr relating to public K-12 schools. BR pending.
Senator Orr.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would move adoption of the BR using the previous roll.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton. Mr. Williams.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The BR is adopted. Secretary, call the bill.
On page 6 of the calendar, Senate Bill number 56 by Senator Orr relating to education. Committee amendment pending.
Mr. President, I'd move adoption of the committee amendment using the previous roll.
All right, any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton, Mr. Williams.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The committee amendment's adopted. Senator Orr.
Only one, they got two committee amendments or one? Just one? Just one, okay. Mr. President, I have a amendment that names the bill and changes the effective date.
All right, Secretary, read and receive the amendment, please.
Amendment to Senate Bill 56 by Senator Orr. Replace line 23 on page 1 with the following. Section 1, this act may be known and cited as Tyler's Law.
Yes.
Replace line 114 on page 5 with the following. Section 3, this act shall become effective on the.
All right, Senator Orr.
Move adoption of the amendment using the previous roll.
All right. Okay. Senator Smitherman.
This is not just a statement to you alone when I say this, but I would hope that when we have something of a real important nature, important statewide. I'm not talking about local stuff or some of those situations.
No, you're right.
Like that.
I got you.
You know what I'm finna say, don't you?
I guess I kind of know the name in the bill. And,
Yeah, we like
the
to share.
effective
We
date.
would like to share in a little names we know in a general situation, not in this bill.
Okay.
But I just got to in the future because
All right.
we appreciate it. That's not just to you neither.
All good.
Thank you.
All good.
All right.
Mr. President, move adopt the amendment using the previous roll. There's no.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton, Mr. Williams.
Sure. 30 ayes, 1 nays. The Senator Orr amendment is adopted.
At this time, Mr. President, I move a third reading using the previous roll.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Albritton, Mr. Williams.
30 ayes, 1 nay. Senate Bill 56 passes amended. Thank you, Senator Orr. This concludes the special order calendar. Senator Reed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, we finished the calendar. A few minutes ago, I was up here talking about us working together, and I think I pounded on the desk once and had one of the senators said they wanted to say amen, thought I was about to preach.
You would be a good preacher.
I was preaching a little bit, but it was, we've had a good day. We've had a good week. We have worked well together, and I stated it earlier, and I reiterate the fact that Alabama gets a better product when everybody's voice is heard and we all work together, and that's what we have been a shining example of this week, so I'm appreciative of that. I want everybody to have a great week coming, a good break, a break this weekend. I want to thank all the staff for their support this week and thank each of the members of the Alabama Senate for their constant dedication to their districts and to the state of Alabama. So, Mr. President, if there's not another word, I'm going to ask that we leave the journal open for House messages. We have a couple of things that are supposed to be coming to us that we're aware of, and then that we stand adjourned until April the 4th at 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon.
All right, you heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned.